Okay, I am live and we are in yet another snowstorm at the start of 2026. It has been crazy here in Ontario. As you can see, it's just endlessly snowing. So, today's live stream, the conversation is what is the hardest lesson that I learned in 2025? And what I'm going to give is the answer and then the why. It's 80% done by others is 100% better than done by myself. And it's also kind of wraps around Dan Sullivan's concept called find the who, not the how. And let me give you context. In 2025, we 3x'd as a business. So I gained 70 more employees. We won two new customers every week for 50 weeks. We tripled revenue. And so this wasn't just a little bit of growth. This was hockey stick level growth. And what ends up happening is every SOP process workflow that we have broken, breaks within months. And so what ends up happening is I get caught in everything that I did to start the business. So lead generation, closing business, onboarding a customer, showing up to, we call them partner pulses, but monthly business reviews, escalation reports, finance meeting. And then you start going cross pollinating out of sales. Then you go into finance and HR and then service delivery issues. And so ends up that it turns out I'm not very scalable. You can only cut me into so many pieces. So, to answer the question directly, the biggest challenge is that if you're growing that quickly, you have to hyper accelerate, getting yourself out of the way. And the first answer to that, and the highest level, is Dan Sullivan's concept called who, not how. So imagine you're faced with a challenge. That challenge is you're wondering how you can improve financial operations. That's my biggest weakness. So my biggest weakness is in the business is financial operations. Instead of me trying to go back to school and study and figure out best practices and fret around how I get things done, like how do I improve gross margins, as an example? The concept of the who, not how, is that you identify somebody who does this every day, that wakes up invigorated to think about gross margins, who studies gross margins. And the who, you find a person who loves this, that who you put in place. That who tells you the how. They bring you the processes, the workflows, the SOPs, the systems to improve gross margins quarter over quarter. And so, what I had to learn really quickly is I had to document every part of the business that I was in and think of how I found a who in every single department, for every single task, for every single project. Every time I sat down at a computer and I thought, oh my God, how can I, as an example, improve our hiring velocity? Well, instead of me sitting there fretting about it, who's never hired 70 people in a year, I bring in a who. That who comes from companies that have done this before. That who builds the plan. That who implements the plan. And you would then have to get comfortable. This comes to the 80%. You have to get really comfortable with not everything being done the way you'd always would have done it. So that's this concept of 80% done by others is 100% better than done by yourself. It is just the velocity of scale comes when you're getting out of the way. Somebody's doing all of these things while you sleep. There might not be exactly the way you would have done it or the way you like it to be done, but it's 80% done. And otherwise, it would have sat on a shelf and you never would have been able to do it yourself. That's 80% done by others, 100% better than done by yourself. So, taking those two concepts together, the first principle is you find a who, the who finds you the how or brings you the how. Then that same who builds a team and a system to ensure that 80% is done and that 80% is better to be done by them than be done by yourself. So that's the two concepts I wanted to bring for today's part of my Masogi is doing a video a day. And this concept is what is the hardest lesson I had to learn? when you triple a business, you break things really fast. Hope all is well.